Okay, I think most people are here. Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's Leaf Surgery. Very much hope you've been keeping safe and well. My name is Will Sibley, and really pleased to be introducing you to today's session. For those in the audience who haven't attended a Leaf Surgery before, Leaf Surgeries are monthly online webinars delivered by the Leaf team to keep in touch with our members and wider audiences too. And usually these sessions fall on the second Friday of every month from September to June. And the focus of these sessions alternate in different themes relevant to food and farming. And we're joined by guest speakers. And we really enjoy hearing their take on these different and important topics. For today's surgery, we'll be looking ahead to the role and value of digital tools for verification. And digital tools are proving with great effect that they can assist multiple stakeholders across the agricultural industry, from farmers to advisory groups and supply chains, with a number of challenges that agriculture is facing, including pathways to decarbonisation and ecological restoration. So not only can digital tools be valuable for farmers themselves in making evidence-based decisions when working to improve the environment and their business, but also digital tools can be of great use to the agricultural industry as a whole and to other sectors when used collaboratively as we support farmers and growers on the journey to address those challenges and provide positive solutions. So we have some brilliant speakers here today representing two different digital tools that exist to support farming and others in the industry to make decisions to generate positive change. And I'm delighted to introduce our first guest speaker, Richard Proffitt. Richard is the CEO of the Cool Farm Alliance, a collaborative community with the mission to accelerate the transition towards regenerative and sustainable agriculture by providing aligned, credible and science-based metrics, tools and resources that create impact in that area. And members of the Cool Farm Alliance range from your leading food and beverage companies to NGOs, academic institutions, and of course farmers and farming groups. And the Cool Farm Alliance also own and manage the Cool Farm tool, which is one brilliant example of a scientifically robust digital carbon accounting and biodiversity tool for farmers far and wide. So a very warm welcome to you, Richard. Thank you very much for being here. And we also have Tim Hopkin, founder of the Land App. Welcome, Tim. Another great example, the Land App is a digital land management design and mapping tool, now used collaboratively by farmers, advisors, supply chains, and for landscape recovery programs. And as a founder of the Land App, Tim comes from 3 generations of farmers in Surrey, and the Land App was created with a desire to better navigate around the agricultural transition whilst incorporating some quite complex business decisions around changing land use. So the Land App can digitize land into a single secure account with the intent of saving time for the user, reducing risk, improving accuracy in land assessments and planning. So brilliant to have you here alongside Richard. Tim, thank you again. And the session will be chaired by our very own Claire Mike, Director of Business Development and Technical at Leaf, who will be talking with our panel after giving you a very quick update on what's been happening at Leaf recently. So good morning to you, Claire. Very warm welcome. And lastly, before I hand over, we really enjoy hearing from our audience too. And it's good to see lots of familiar faces as well, some new ones here today. And please do submit your questions to Tim and Richard via the chat function, which should be somewhere on the bottom of your window. And we've saved some time at the end for a Q&A. Great, so thank you. Sit back and relax and enjoy the discussion. Over to you, Claire.
Well, a very warm welcome to you all, as always. Before we delve into that world of digital tools, I'd love to share a few highlights from Leaf from the last month. So let's start with the AgriCapture project. We held a hugely engaging and informative event at Duncan Farrington's farm, home of Mellow Yellow Oils, last month, with a stellar lineup of speakers, including Duncan himself and also Rebecca Hesketh from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and Henry Dimbleby. The theme was Regen in the Round, and we considered the potential for regenerative outcomes at farm, landscape and societal level. So it was a really brilliant event and very well attended. So hope some of you managed to make that. Leaf Education welcomed visitors to a pop-up event pop-up knowledge event, at Dyson Farming, where over 3/4 of attendees expressed that they would make changes as a result of attending that event. For example, trying new activities, having confidence to deliver activities all at different times of year, working with different age groups, specifically with teenagers and secondary school young people. Some of the feedback included that soil is the most fun thing ever. I'm sure a great many of us would agree with that. And that cross-pollination is essential for knowledge exchange. We use that term a lot at Leaf, actually, that cross-pollination of ideas. Yeah, so really great news that was such a success. Last month, we also saw Leaf Education's national competition at Myerscough College. Leaf Education's ran this competition actually for a very large number of years now, and the finalist weekend entails a really action-packed weekend for a select number of students. And this year they were asked to consider the hypothesis: the number one part of integrated management, a farm management wheel, is more important, or no one element of the integrated farm management wheel is more important than the other. Apologies. There was a really great satisfaction rate from teachers who found the event to be really engaging and really helpful in designing their teaching. And all of the students attending shared that they now understood much better what the opportunities were within the sector for employment and their careers. So, as I'm sure you'll all agree, a very successful weekend. And congratulations to the winners, by the way, Heartlands Academy. That sounds like it might come from my home turf. But yeah, so let's, without any further ado, let's start talking about today's subject, today's theme. We've got two guests today. Thank you so much, Richard and Tim, for joining us. I'm going to start with some really easy questions, if that's okay. And Richard, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work at Cool Farm Alliance, and particularly how and why it was founded?
Thank you very much. So I'm Richard. I'm Chief Exec of the Cool Farm, and I've been with the Cool Farm Alliance just over 5 years now. And prior to that, I was 16 years at PepsiCo, leading their global climate strategy for their global operations. So I'm not a farmer. I don't pretend to be a farmer, and I leave those sort of farming technical questions to the likes of agronomists and farmers and people who understand that broader context. But in terms of the Cool Farm Alliance, we're a not-for-profit membership organisation drawing membership from about 150 plus companies from around the world. You know, some of them have already been named, so I'm not going to name drop them again. But the Cool Farm tool itself has been used and is applied in over 150 countries around the world. And it is a global tool. It's not a UK-specific tool. And typically we see it being adopted by sort of corporate supply chains who are operating on a multinational basis. So they've got a single tool that all their farmers and farm suppliers can use, rather than having different tools for different countries. But part of the other key piece of the Cool Farm tool is that the origin story. The original point of the whole Cool Farm tool was to help bridge science and farming, so that that science can be translated for application at farm, but actually more importantly, that the insights from farmers about what does work, doesn't work, and is realistic can actually feed back into the academic research processes. And that was the original intent, and then linked into that was the sort of reporting aspect to this. So for that data that's gathered at farms to be able to report back to farmers, so that it can help inform their on-farm decisions and their farm management practices and their crop plans and the like, but also for that data to be reported into the supply chain, so that their carbon assessment can go to their customers, for them to be able to then include that data as part of their Scope 3 emissions reporting. And I'm going to come back later, I think, to more points around farm-specific context and how these tools shouldn't be remotely telling you what to do. But that's a juicy bit for later on.
Thanks, Richard. We'll look forward to that. Tim, same question to you, if that's okay. Tell us a bit about yourself and why you founded LandApp.
Yes, thank you, Claire, and lovely to meet everyone here today. So yeah, my context is I was, as Claire said, brought up on a 90-acre family farm. So we're just south of Guildford in Surrey. I'm fourth generation and was very conscious as I was growing up that there was a high probability that the farm may end up getting sold on my watch, because farming is not hugely profitable and there's a lot of pressures on farming to continue to make proper revenue. So I studied regenerative agriculture about 13 years ago with Darren Doherty, Joel Salatin and Kurt Gadzia, and tried to implement those principles on the farm and realized how difficult it was on paper and on Google Earth. So I thought likely there would be a tool out in the market that would help me design the farm and help me access new income, or at least make sure that our farm was robust for the future. I waited and waited and waited a few years and nothing came about. And eventually I got so frustrated that I went to Ordnance Survey and I said, guys, look, you're Britain's National Mapping Agency. I've got an idea for a piece of mapping software. I'm pretty sure it's important given the amount of farmers I know. Can you help me build it? Anyway, long story short, I got on their first ever innovation program. We built the first proof of concept and then really started growing the Land app in 2017. So the core mission of what we care about is we are a technology company, I guess, but we care about the outcomes. We care about a thriving rural environment that is able to prosper in perpetuity. So we care about farmers getting well remunerated for the services they're delivering, both into the supply chain. And obviously, Claire, that's what we're working on with you. And also making sure that water companies will fund farmers to do the right thing in the right place. That DEFRA is actually paying farmers properly to do the right thing in the right place and in an efficient way, so that farmers aren't having to incur big consultancy fees before they can access cash. So we're all about helping the money flow more fairly through the system, so farmers are well remunerated for the value that they're creating for society, and just trying to keep that in the most simple possible way we can. So just to give a sense of scale, yeah, we've now got around 9.2 million hectares of land has been mapped on Land app by our customers. And yeah, we work with a whole range of people, from the land agents, the wildlife trust, the NGOs, the flags. I can see a few people here today. We're doing bits with you, Claire, with M&S, and we're doing bits with Sainsbury's. We're doing stuff with the banks, doing stuff with the water companies. So, and we've got a call after. I've got a call after this with DEFRA, the head of geospatial, to talk about Land app actually being connected to DEFRA to remove the burden of having to turn everything into paper maps and then send, in emails. So we're trying to streamline the whole process just to make sure that ELMS is a success, and it really facilitates private funding to come to farmers as well. So little snapshot, we care about the outcome in the real world, and we just do what we can by building the tech to make that possible. So yeah, lovely to meet everyone, and hopefully we can help in some way, shape or form.
Thank you so much, Tim. That's really, really exciting that you managed to get in there first and with that proof of concept. Really exciting stuff there. Right, Richard, I'd love to ask you, how do you verify the data from your tool? And why is verification important in terms of kind of that evidence base?
Okay, I'm going to start in reverse order. So why is that verification important? I think ultimately verification is about trusting the data, and trusting the data is key, so that you can build decisions on it, and the insights that come from that data become meaningful. Within the Cool Farm tool, the verification happens with service providers. So it's about verifying the input data into the Cool Farm tool. So that means someone needs to kind of cross-reference and double check that the farm records match the data that's being inputted into the Cool Farm tool. So that can be initiated either by the farmer who's submitting the data, or it could be initiated by one of the supply chain companies that's wanting to report on that data, and they pay for and ask for people like Control Union to come in and verify that input data. Interestingly, we're starting to see efforts now to use remote sensing to verify data, like satellites trying to verify data. I think it's probably the way it will need to go from a volume of data that needs to be processed, but there's a huge amount of hurdles to make that actually achievable and realistic and accurate. So in the foreseeable future, data verification is still going to be a relatively manual process. Now, there are things that tools can do, and we're looking at this for the evolution of the Cool Farm tool in terms of putting validation steps on the input data. And so you put in ranges, and if the data's inside the range, it's kind of deemed to be okay. And if it's outside that range, it'll flag something. The challenge is every farm's different. And so how do you determine what a normal range is for any particular farm? And that becomes the challenge with that as well. But ultimately, it does come back to having confidence of high quality data. As they say, garbage in equals garbage out. So it's important that data going into is as accurate as possible.
Thank you, Richard. Tim, I'm going to pop the same question to you, if that's okay with you. So how are you verifying the data? And from your perspective, why is this an important step? Why is verification important?
Yeah, well, exactly as Richard just said, I think what we need in the sector is trust. Trust is going to be what makes everything work. It'll be what makes the money flow. It's what allows the supply chains to understand that the contracts are being honored, that we're not accidentally disrupting waterways with agrochemicals. So this idea of how do we connect reality as close as possible to the data? The data is only a representation of reality. And as Richard said, you really need someone who can support the process of putting in the right data such that good information is flowing to all the other stakeholders that need to be part of that digital story. And what we're seeing at the moment through our work with supermarkets and banks and water companies is that they are all having to report up to their shareholders the resilience of them as a business or the risk profile of them as a business. So this is the task force for nature-related financial disclosures, this sort of top line of risk reporting. And a little bit like Richard alluded to, the scope 3 emissions, the carbon emissions, that data from a farm is flowing up to the corporate. They're then aggregating it into a score, essentially, and then that data is being shared up or reported to the regulators and shareholders. So what we need in this entire land sector is really good quality data flowing in at the bottom at the farm level, and then that data being able to be passed through the supply chain to the corporates. And the good thing about, although that might feel onerous, it's actually a really good thing because it means that everyone's actually working together and that there's collaboration in the sector. And what we're seeing is it's creating the argument for the food retailers who justify budget, who fund resilience measures on a farm. So when the food retailer really understands what's going on, there is a capacity they have to then help. So robust data is imperative. It's going to be a fundamental underpinning of the entire land sector over the next couple of years and on into the future. And I think when done right, it'll really help create robustness and resilience through the whole system, such that we can actually meet all of our environmental targets. So hopefully that answers some of the question, Claire.
It definitely does, Tim, and it leads me on to the next question very neatly. So thank you very much. You've said there robust data is imperative, and we all know that to be true. What are the biggest challenges, though, to that robustness of data, whether that's at farm level or whether that's where it starts to filter through the supply chain? What are those challenges? Perhaps I'll come to you first, Richard, and then Tim, same question to you, if that's okay.
Sure. Okay, so I think, we've touched on a few things and trust, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But I think one of the aspects is data records and availability. So from experience of working with some of our members and some of the farmers, there's, again, different farms have different, I don't know what the right language is here, different levels of record keeping, shall we say. And some have very, very detailed records, some are digitized and the like, and others, it's in a paper file in the office somewhere, and it becomes a much more manual process to be able to dig through that and identify. And I think as this industry matures in terms of this data flow that Tim mentioned through the supply chain and the importance of that coming through, I think farmers will have to kind of get on board and think about their farm data and kind of create the systems at the farm level for that data to be available for them to report in. Now, the ideal solution here is where farmers are using farm management software that's incorporated in with the calculation tools and the reporting tools. So actually there's not an additional burden onto farmers, and it can just flow through. But I think the second point, coming back to trust around this, is whose tool are you using? Because there's lots and lots of tools out there, and frankly, not all of them are trustworthy. Many are, but many aren't. And I think there's issues around what's the ownership model of the tools? Is it VC money behind it? You know, what's their ultimate aim here? What are they doing with your data? Are you the one as a farmer granting the permissioning of what they do with that data? And if it is supplied through this, if that data is supplied to the various aspects of the supply chain, is it you that's giving permission, or is that signed away by signing up and using to a tool? All very important questions that you need to be challenging the tool providers on. So, for example, if we look at the Cool Farm tool, and I'm not selling the Cool Farm tool, I'm not here for that today. But if we look at that, we don't share your data. There's a mechanism by which you as a farmer can share your data. It's called a share code, and if you're supplying, say, to a PepsiCo and you're selling potatoes to Walkers, you can initiate the process that says, yeah, share my potato assessment with Walkers. Okay, but we will not do it unless you've given permission. And I think that sort of process is absolutely key for this, because this data is valuable to the supply chain companies, because they can build their marketing strategies on it, they can build their business development strategies on it. So don't just give it away. And I think that's very, very important, for that. The final piece I'm just going to drop in because I'm conscious of time and I want to give Tim a piece to add is, as this data flows through the supply chain, there's a real risk that through the way the data is consolidated, aggregated, shared, and then the insights that go on that, there's a real strong possibility of the introduction of bias into that data, and coming up with conclusions or results that do not accurately reflect the original data or the true intent of the original data. And I think that needs good transparency and data governance to identify and eliminate that. And that data governance piece, to my mind, should actually be a collaborative industry response, appropriate standards and guidelines, so that we have a common framework that we can work on and work with. My only watch out and caveats with any centralized standards is they take forever to get to, and usually they're watered down to the point of perhaps being useless. So there's a pragmatic balance to be struck in getting something meaningful and something timely that does the job. That's me.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, we're not unaware of the challenges of standardization here at Leaf, so yeah, completely understand your point there. Tim, I'd love to ask you the same question if that's okay. What challenges do you see?
Yeah, so there are really good examples in other sectors where this has been done relatively well, which is good, because it means we're not having to reinvent the wheel, so as to speak. So one big thing we're advocating, so probably the easiest starting point. So the private sector is working it out as it goes, as the TNFD forms, the SBTN forms, like this top level corporate reporting is being worked out. So it's a little bit more fuzzy as to what's exactly needed. Carbon is one thing, but as Richard said, you don't always know that the carbon number that's coming out of all these range of tools is the number. So there's a little bit of fuzziness. Where there is more concrete processes with the government schemes. So this is things like obviously countryside stewardship, FFI, hopefully biodiversity net gain, and these other things that are coming. And what we're basically advocating for DEFRA and Treasury is that they replicate what HMRC did with making tax digital. So I'm sure most people on the call today, they do their tax returns using something like Xero, QuickBooks, Sage, and they basically, that is undeniable data. That is like proper, company data that has integrity, and then that gets pushed to a government agency in a very simple click of a button, and off it goes. It gets received on the government side, and that goes into your kind of corporate profile, whatever. And we think that DEFRA should adhere to the same sort of principles, where there is a simple digital interface that allows DEFRA to absorb structured data. Sorry, this could get a bit boring for people, but because the easier it is for you guys as farmers to push data to DEFRA, the lower cost, the lower hassle, the higher integrity, the less, oh, sorry, we didn't quite get that. Did you mean it was that option or that option? Or you put an arable option on a grass field? Okay, big email thread. What we're trying to do is remove any of that burden so that you guys can all apply for government schemes in a very low cost, low friction way, so you can properly get funded to do the right thing in the right place. So in terms of robustness, we want DEFRA to replicate what HMRC did, simplify the digital connection so that people can much more cost effectively submit schemes for funding. And then one of the other, and that will create a robust digital infrastructure that then can be replicated by the private sector. Because as farms, I know on our farm, we do not want to do something once for DEFRA or twice or 3 times or 4 times for DEFRA and then go and repeat it again for, you know, up to the supermarkets, then another one for the bank, then another one for the water company, then another one for the local council. We want to do it once. And then, like Richard said, you guys have the power to share that data to the third parties that you choose to share the data to. If you no longer work with M&S or whoever, you just switch the data off and you turn it to someone else. So yeah, just in summary, we want the public and private sector to adhere to the same data logic. You guys as farmers only have to do the work once. You get good quality baseline data, you design up your future plan, and you can basically access funding from as many different streams as possible in a way that has integrity. So I think the whole land sector needs to transition to this model where the public and private sectors fund farmers to do the right thing in the right place, reduce the admin burden in accessing that money, and then the cash will really flow. And that robustness is basically what's going to make it possible. So hopefully that answers your question, Claire. I could go down rabbit holes of Ordnance Survey, Master Map, and all these other data sources that would increase the speed and the efficiency. But basically, we're just trying to get the public and private sector to adhere to the same principles, so farmers only have to do the work once and they can access the funding easily.
It's a brilliant explanation. Thanks, Tim. And I'm sure anybody within the audience that wants to know more are very welcome to get in touch with the Land App team to be able to ask their questions. And don't forget, you can put questions into the chat function. Do encourage you to do that while you're here too. Tools don't exist in isolation, as you've alluded to there. There's policy sitting around them, there's supply chain sitting around them. What is the role then of collaboration across the industry and how we work with tools and other stakeholders and other solutions for the benefit of farmers and growers and wider society as well? Richard, I might point that in your direction first, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. I think collaboration's key. You know, as Tim talked about, we can't do these things in isolation. Farmers don't want to be doing these things, you know, multiple times for different customers or different compliance schemes. And so there needs to be a cross-industry collaboration, and that means, you know, the supply chain companies, the food producers, the retailers, as well as the farmers and the farming cooperatives and, you know, service providers, as well as the academics. You know, there needs to be cross collaboration, and that's part of the essence of the Cool Farm Alliance. We are an alliance because we're bringing all those sort of different voices together. And the other aspect to this that kind of is often overlooked, particularly maybe by DEFRA and some of the other things, is food is international. So the idea of coming up with UK specific tools or resources is, frankly, to my mind, pointless. I mean, yes, it serves a purpose, but the reality is the stuff you're growing, some of it will be going to the UK, but other stuff will be going abroad. And so therefore there's going to be people in those other countries wanting your data as well. So we do need an international solutions for this. I mean, other aspects around collaboration become really important. So things like it builds relationships and trust, respect, understanding, and alignment. And the alignment piece becomes important, particularly as Tim alluded to, this idea of sort of data interoperability between platforms and systems becomes key. So we need a common data language to allow for this flow of data, and that will need to be global. And there are various initiatives around the world attempting to do that at the moment, and we're seeing greater movement on that from the private sector than we are from the government sector. So I think the private sector will actually end up with the solution before.
Mm.
Part of the concern maybe from the private sector is, again, who's going to control those databases and centralized registries of that data, and then what are they doing with it? So in my mind, that centralized database registry should be a impartial, not-for-profit organization of some sort, not a for-profit controlled. But maybe, you know, I'm out of touch with modern times and capitalism. The other aspect to collaboration is it allows, if it's done properly, it allows for co-investment, both co-investment in terms of the tools and those databases, but also for the creation of incentives and mechanisms to support farmers with the transition. And, you know, often in these debates, farmers are left out of the conversation. And the reality of it is it's all for nothing if the farmer can't create positive change on the ground. And that's ultimately, to my mind, the critical point around collaboration. It's all about empowering the farmer to build that resilience and sustainability on farm. And I'm also conscious that the other aspect of sustainability for farmers that is often left out is actually sustainability starts with the financial sustainability of the farm, because if they can't create a living, they're not growing anything. So that has to come first, and then how do they do that in a climate resilient and environmentally resilient and beneficial way?
Thanks, Richard. We have a saying here at Leaf, or it's one of Caroline's sayings: "You can't be green if you're in the red," and we use that a lot. And it's very true that to enable farmers and growers to do the right thing, we do need to ensure that businesses are economically resilient and socially resilient, as well as environmentally resilient. Tim, can I pop the same question to you, and then we'll probably end there with my questioning, and we'll open up to the audience. So please do, while Tim's answering, please do pop any of your questions into the chat function. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, well, it goes without saying, everything Richard just said, I totally agree with. It's actually really rare, I find, in a lot, not these conversations, because this is where the conversation is happening, but generally in kind of a policy curation, is DEFRA totally forget that everything they do is just to serve the people on the ground. And I was on a panel the other day presenting to 250 of the DEFRA Environment Directorate, and I just said, look, guys, all of us are here to serve the farmers, the people on the ground. That is literally all we exist for. You know, none of us really matter. It's all about what happens in the real world. Resilience isn't going to happen inside DEFRA. You know, global resilience of ecosystems and landscapes is not going to happen inside an office in London. It's going to happen by people being empowered to do the right thing in the right place and getting fairly remunerated for it. Like, you know, on our family farm, we're just doing a higher tier countryside stewardship. You still have to be quite philanthropic to do a higher tier countryside stewardship. It's not that profitable. It's a real hassle to get into. And if we're going to restore landscapes and create this resilience of soil, biodiversity, you know, quality water, energy and infrastructure, we're going to have to make sure that farmers are properly funded in profit that allows these things to be done. And that's where we think government should pay for the income foregone for farmers, and then the private sector pays for the rest. So someone buys the carbon, someone does the water services, someone does the biodiversity services, and farmers make proper profit for the services they're delivering to society. So collaboration, and like Richard said, this is all about a common data language. We all need to be able to speak in the same language, because that will be what allows communication to happen, and that will enable transactions. Transactions mean money in the bank account, and that means profit, and that means things get done. So, and at the moment, the whole system is broken, fragmented. It's not, people aren't communicating properly, and that's why cash isn't flowing. So collaboration is critical. And Richard, this is probably a conversation for another time, but I'm curious still about, where does this data sit? And this may not be the one for now, but I still think the farmer or the land manager or the freeholder or the tenant should own their data. Like, that's their secret source. And it might have to be something like the blockchain, like a public ledger, that is where the data is held and the contracts are formed. So it doesn't kind of almost sit in the public or private sector. It sits in the ownership of the owner of the assets, which is the land manager. So anyway, that could go down rabbit holes that we don't want to go down today. But yeah, so I think collaboration is critical. Common data language is imperative. Everything we're doing is to serve the land manager. As soon as society sees that, the better. And we need cash to flow so farmers make profit, so things actually get done, and we do have a resilient landscape. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Oh, brilliant, Tim. Thank you. And do join us for the next surgery when we'll be talking about blockchain. No, only joking.
Hey, Claire, can I just jump in?
Yes,
Can I just
please,
jump in with
Richard.
something?
Yes,
It's
yes.
interesting that we call this a surgery. In a recent conversations I've been having, there's been a bit of a reframe where we should be regarding farmers as doctors of the land, and that farmers actually should be held in the same regard as doctors are. You know, in society. I do remember this, was it the Stella Artois advert from about 10 years ago, which had where the doctors were the farmers were the sort of community heroes, and I think that's true, and I think people have completely forgotten that food is the basis of all of human society, and if people don't start respecting the environment and what farmers do around the world, I think we have a real problem over the next 10, 15 years. So I'd like to think and promote farmers as doctors of the land.
Yeah, well said, Richard, and also incredible scientists, as we know too. Brilliant, fantastic. Will, I'm going to pass over to you now. So thank you both for answering my questions. We're going to answer a couple from the audience now, if that's okay with you. Will, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been really interesting to listen through, and I have some questions in the chat and some directly to me. I'll just I'll direct them as I go. Tim, we'll start with one at you. Of some say they're all for the blend of public and private funding to support the transition, but specifically for private funding. How do we make the eligibility fair for all farmers when there's such a range across the farming sector and with land ownership too, in terms of, I guess, the business models that are out there? So how do we do this?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So we're only 90 acres, 35 hectares. So we would definitely get left behind in the current system. You know, the big estates with big brands and teams that can go and find cash will win inside this new forming market. So I know this isn't really like a land, you know, not here to promote land up or whatever, but you know, it's the reason that we've got a freemium model where any farmer can come in, they can put in their SDI number, see their field boundaries, and then see all of the different schemes available to them. You know, we cannot have anyone left behind, because what it'll mean is people that are multi-generational like me will get essentially forced off the land because the cash won't be there to keep us on it, and that is not good for society. And land isn't just an asset; it is a very emotive, potentially you could say spiritual thing. Like it would be, devastating if our farm was taken off us or whatever. So yeah, we are very much about making sure that no one is left behind in this transition. And inside that, one of the big reasons I'm advocating ordnance survey data become free for farmers who have an SBI number, get paid public money to deliver a public good, is if they have decision quality data for free, it means they can much more easily assess biodiversity net gain, water company funding, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to empower people with great data for free, because it will help them access markets very quickly. And then we definitely believe that accredited advisors like WAG are able to go and quickly assess those farms, the ecological status of those farms, because once the baseline has been verified, it can underpin a contract, which will help a farmer get into these schemes. So, yeah, hopefully, that helps. And so we believe no one should be left behind. So we've made a system that allows everyone to come into the market through Land App, and then we're advocating for OS data to be free, for every farmer to get connected to an advisor who can verify the data, design a future plan, and access this new funding. So the system is like, we're having to do a lot of wrangling in DEFRA ordnance survey to make the system work, but that's philosophically where we're going. And I think we'll be there in the next 3 to 6 months with OS and DEFRA on board for this transition.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, what I'm taking from that, it needs to be inclusive, and the system needs to be backed up, like foolproof, essentially. No, thank you. And leads on, you touched on there to the next question, which I think I'll direct to both of you. From Helen in the chat. If the data is verified by third parties, like for example CU, is this combined with other audits, or does it result in a separate audit? So it might be leading to the dual functionality maybe of farmers holding data and how they can use that across for different purposes. So maybe Richard, you seeing as the Core Farm Alliance big collaborative organization, maybe you could answer that question first, if that's okay.
I think in the majority of the verification process at the moment, it's probably a separate audit in reality now. I think it needs to be incorporated into the other sort of system audits that happen at farms, because there's no reason why it can't be included within other audits programs that are happening, and it should be, right. You know, I've been on a farm where the farmer was quite rightly very frustrated with the fact that I think in 3 weeks he'd had 4 audits, you know, and that's not sustainable, you know. So it should be incorporated. Again, it comes back to collaboration, how these things can be defined and systemized. But practically at the moment, I think in the most part, it is a separate audit.
Thank you. And Tim, you got any input on this one?
I don't know. I'm conscious of time as well, but I just think, yeah, like kind of we've been alluding to, we just want farmers to do something once, as automated as that can be, through sensors on the farm, taking photos as you go, quickly filling in bits of information that centralize that data that can get sent to whoever needs it. Like, that is just where we need to get to, because it is just a waste of everyone's time, double working. Yeah, my granddad reinforced to me, do not move things twice. And I think that's what we've got to avoid. So yeah, Richard's point, let's just get it simplified, confirmed, and let's just get things done once and that data shared to whoever, but the farmer chooses who that data is shared to, and they can turn off that access when the contracts change. So, I don't know, I haven't got much more to add than that.
Okay, thank you. We'll have time for one more question quickly, if that's okay. And it goes back to, I think, allowing farmers to choose what's best for them, and in terms of tools, and it's in the carbon context. So I'll ask Richard, when choosing a carbon calculator for a farm, what attributes should we check for before signing up? And you know, there's lots of different tools out there. So yeah, what should a farm look into themselves before choosing the right tool?
Okay, I think there's 2. So the first one would be transparency. To what extent is the tool transparent about its calculation methodology? Is it a black box where they're very protective of the IP because effectively they're trying to make money out of it and make money out of farmers, or is it transparent and it's available? Now, it might not be that you can necessarily understand all the detail that might be in the transparency of the technical documentation that explains the methodology, but if it's available and if it's been reviewed by others and publicly available in those reviews, I think that's a better standing. Some of the tools out there are getting paying for third parties to review and give it some sort of seal of approval, but then still not making the data available. I would be dubious about that. The second piece comes back to ownership of the tool, scale of use, and ultimately, it's also then about the user interface and your user experience of using that tool. You know, there are a number of credible tools in the UK, but farmers have a preference for using one over the other just because they get on better with the user interface on it. And I think that's as an important aspect as sort of, you know, the stuff behind the scenes. And the final piece around this is the insights that come out of the tool. They should empower the farmer to work with the on-farm advisors, whether it's an agronomist or an ecologist or whatever they're doing, you know, on the farm, to inform the discussion that happens on farm, so that the farmer can decide for themselves what their context is and therefore what practices and processes they need to be applying at the farm are right for them. And you know, we've been asked plenty of times, well, can you provide benchmarking between farms? And we're trying to work this out, but the biggest challenge for this is no 2 farms are the same. You know, there's so many variables in this between soil type, pH, how wet the soil is and the weather that comes with it, what you're growing, what your rotation is. These all have an effect on the results, particularly, you know, from a carbon perspective, nitrous oxide perspective. And that actually means that it's very difficult to find two farms that are directly comparable. So again, it's about what tool works for you and then being consistent with that tool over time and deliver your own reductions over time for what's best for you and your land. Trying to get to my score's better than theirs is a meaningless statement, because they might be performing better for their land than you are for your land, even though it's a worse sort of carbon number, because everything has its own maximum potential. So choosing a tool, follow your heart, go with transparency, and work with tools that gives you insights that you can work with.
It's a brilliant, strong answer to finish, and strong finish there. Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you very much, Tim. It's been fantastic to hear from you and the discussion as a whole today. Really interesting, and for the answer, the questions from our audience. Really appreciate you coming and sending those through. And thank you to Claire for joining. Really good to see everyone, and looking forward to our next surgery. And Claire just put a note, and we'll be joined by speakers from DEFRA to hear about SFI. So Tim, you might want to join that one too. So do look out for the email. And meanwhile, enjoy the rest of your Fridays and weekends. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Tim and Richard.
Pleasure. Lovely to meet you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.